It did take a little bit to file people in, but I think everybody's in rooms now.
And we are apparently successfully recording.
Well, I'll hop to the next one, make sure.
Thanks. Hopefully Quasi didn't get mauled by his cats on the break.
Yeah, Kyle, where's that shot on behind your screen there?
It's somewhere out on the coast. It's actually, I've got a lot of pictures like that, but that's when somebody put into this thing with the department logo on it for meetings. So
Looks like it might be around Needles.
I think I recognize the C stack in the way back, and I think I actually have some pictures of it from the other angle, but it looks like Quasi is back. And Quasi, I went ahead and hit record when Leah popped in to make sure it worked, and it worked. We are recording. So whenever you guys are ready.
Great, sounds good. All right. Well, I think we're just gonna get right into it. Get rolling here. So Mickey is gonna be my screen sharer with everyone. And same format as the forecast meeting. We actually just kind of built onto that presentation. So I don't think we're going to dip into any forecast information, but Mickey is here to answer any forecast questions, and we'll just roll through what we have for you guys today, and we have time at the end for questions.
Is that showing up in your ad, Quasi?
Yep, showing up on my end. Let me get this. Let me not press the button and get that breakout room thing out of the way. All right, so you can go ahead and do the next slide. All right, so a quick agenda. I wouldn't mind doing introductions this go. Since these North Falcon ones are a little bit more formal than our forecast kickoff. Zoom etiquette, you guys have been informed on how to do the raise hand functions. That works best. So we'll go over Zoom etiquette, staff on the call today, and then our state objectives for our 2021 commercial season. As most of you guys have been asking for a while now, we did prepare some 2020 treaty catch information by region and actually by area as well. And then we'll roll into our 2021 non-treaty season planning that is at hand and have time for some questions and answers. All right, so next slide. Ooh, where'd this come from?
I borrowed the Zoom etiquette commercial breakout from the last round here, but yeah, it's pretty generally the same rules as the last meeting that Kyle ran. Please keep your camera off or unmute yourself through the control panel at the bottom of your screen. We'll keep folks muted during the beginning of our program and then unmute with questions or feedback. And please ask you to use the raise your hand feature. And then also please be respectful of others, mute phone or the line, be tough on issues and questions, not people or WDFW. No personal attacks, insults, or threats, and speak and act professionally. And we'll allow for a balance of speaking time for all the members on the phone here. If you have any technical questions during the call, just feel free to use the chat button and we'll call Leah back on the line to help us fix the issue.
Excellent. All right, so staff introductions. Today, myself, a commercial biologist. You just heard Mickey, our pink chum sockeye specialist. Dave Lau is on the line. He's our commercial manager. Kyle is here. We were kind of unsure as to who would be our other folks. Do I have any other DFW staff on the line that wouldn't mind introducing themselves? take that as a no. So yeah, if we can just run through our participants here.
Question for you.
Go ahead. This is coming from the 360 last 3407.
Yeah, I'm in Alaska right now. I've got pretty poor cell reception. It keeps cutting off. Is there a way that I can get back into the breakout session if I get cut off?
Ooh, I'm not the person to ask for that question. Kyle, do you know if they can just call back in and it will automatically assign to a breakout?
I don't know if it'll be automatically assigned. It might kick to the main lobby for the meeting, but Leah's monitoring that to make sure people who get disconnected can get back in.
Okay, and while you're
Great,
on the
you.
line, would you mind introducing yourself?
Nick Jones,
Nick Jones.
Chris Fire.
Hey, Nick.
Hi.
I'm just going to call on folks as they appear on my screen. So next down the line is Bob Kehoe.
So yeah, I'm here. Thanks.
Yep.
Quasi.
No problem. Good morning, Bob. Shannon Moore.
Yeah, I'm here, Puget Sound gillnet fisherman, Bellingham, thanks.
Jack Giard.
Here, good morning, and Washington Reef Net Owners Association President.
All right, thank you, Jack. Steve Thatcher.
Good morning, it's Steve Thatcher here, Washington Reef Net Owners Association and Area 12C Beach Scene.
Greg Lovrovich.
Yeah, good morning, PSVOA board and first Sainer.
Fred Marinkovich.
Yeah, I'm here, Puget Sound Harvesters President.
Great. And Tom Lovrovich.
Good morning. Puget Sound, first Sainer, beach scene. Hello, everyone.
Brian Love. And it looks like also John Indicote. I think that's everyone for today.
Good morning, Puget Sound Purse Seiner.
Good morning. All right. Okay, so for this North Falcon one, over broader WDFW mission, we have our mission statements that I did not include in this because I'm sure you guys have heard it many times. But for the state's commercial objectives for 2021, we're coming into this year with an understanding that we're going to be operating under precautions due to nearly historic low abundances, similar to the last 2 years where we're entering a preseason and crafting fisheries for a season. This time it kind of feels like we have the training from the last 2 years, unfortunately, to say, okay, look, here's what we are going to do differently for 2021 due to the low abundance. And so that is that crafting fisheries when we're in when and where we can be assured that conservation measures can be attained. So the staff and myself, Kyle, Mickey, Dave, all of us, who work really closely with you guys on the commercial end of things, we're committed to using all the data and tools at our disposal to investigate the most prudent path forward for 2021 fisheries. As you've heard probably from the end of last year from our postseason, we said, hey, we're going to sit here and think outside the box for some novel approaches into Puget Sound chum specifically. How are things worked in the past? Are they appropriate for low abundance times? Let's look at different options. And in doing so, we are not the experts when it comes to getting the fish out of the water. That is your guys' job. So we very much do value your comments and opinions up to this point. We've had a great comment collection period for our 5-year beach seine report. And, I myself really do value that input, as it makes our lives a lot easier with the more communication that we have. All right, Mickey. So yeah, we'll just keep cruising right here. So for the non-treaty comparison to treaty catch and our treaty catch analysis, I should say summary, I did throw up 2019 to look at in comparison to 2020. So all the graphs are 2019 on the left, 2020 on the right. We'll see a first summary one that's just by the regions. So San Juan, Point Roberts, Bellingham, Sandwich area, Tulalip, Stilley, South Sound, Hood Canal, and then we did separate out Area 9. All right, next one. So again, this is recorded and we'll most likely print this out. But so here we have our 2019 and 2020 treaty catch summary. This is only representative of treaty catch for the larger regions. So as you can see, Hood Canal was marginally better, or a lot better in 2020. Everyone across the board did pretty bad Hood Canal was better in 2019. Everyone across the board did pretty bad in 2020, but we do have that Area 9 catch to the furthest right column in each year. And this is some of the first time we've really kind of seen some of this Area 9 numbers. And I think this gives us pretty valuable information going into the season planning when we know, just north of the bridge. And I should clarify, the way we pull the Area 9 data, there's no finer resolution than just the area provided on the fish ticket. So treaty tribes do fish in other areas of Admiralty Inlet, and other areas of Area 9, but this should be pretty representative of most of the effort that we see during the same weeks 41 or through 46-ish north of the bridge there. So it looks like in 2019, what's being reported is 21,780 fish. And in 2020, it was nearly 14,000 fish at 13,784 north of the bridge. All right, we'll keep next slide. So now we can just break it down by area. Again, 2019 and 2020, we'll see our treaty catch compared to our non-treaty. I've scaled. If we can remind folks to mute when they're mute their phones, especially. I scaled each graphs identically, so you will see sometimes it does look like there's a huge catch disproportionality. So it looks like treaty catch will be on the left, non-treaty on the right. So there's our 60 differences. And these have not been normalized for schedule or season. This is just a raw dump of who caught what. And here's our 7A breakout. Obviously, not much 2019 when we did not fish, or outside of that early window, and then there was closure. This one was requested by our Bellingham Sandwich Bay fishers. The treaty catch in 7B, CD versus non-treaty in 7B and 7C. As you see here, we do catch significantly less coho across the board than our co-manager and non-treaty counterparts. So what this brings up in question is, how do we then go forth when we are confronted by, non-treaty fishers have to do XYZ for conservation? When it's saying like, well, let's look at the disproportionality and catch. So moving forward for 2021, we have not had any of those conversations yet. We haven't been asked to do anything specific for any of the 7B, 7C areas yet. We do know last year there was the issue of the overlapping crab fishery. And, I think our commercial staff are committed to say, hey, that didn't work out for us. We saw, it didn't really work out for crab fishers either. But again, this is really good information to see kind of where the strength of certain arguments lie when it comes to conservation. All right, you can go on the next one. 9A, this one should be pretty obvious for anyone who's fishing 9A. We do have a pretty strong treaty catch in there as opposed to our non-treaty catch. And the reason I'm suspecting is the implementation of the closure areas that happened 3 years ago. That is on the list of things to talk to when we get to our region by region co-manager discussion times. Is we are seeing that, the 4,000 foot closures in front of these little creeks that are not fish bearing creeks have significantly affected non-treaty's ability to catch coho during coho fishery in 9A when they're returning to net pens. So this is something that I'm not going to use the word excited. I am looking forward to having this conversation with Port Gamble about alleviating these closure areas, and if possible, coming in a negotiating tactic of saying, pick one and keep one of them, and we'll be fine with removing the 3 of them. And that's maybe something I can sit down and talk with some of the Skiff Gillnet folks, like if Evan Brady were online, or Terry, I don't think they are today, about some options moving forward with the 9A non-treaty fishery. All right, next one. So no big surprise here on our area 10. When we're in there, we do well if there's fish to be caught. Obviously no catch, no harvest for 2020, but this does show you guys what the tribes did in 2020. So right around 17,500 chum were harvested. Mickey, off the top of your head, do you remember what the treaty tribal share was for 2020?
For 10, 11, I don't have the latest numbers, but I can send that to the group in the chat shortly.
Okay, sounds good. All right, and you can click the next one. All right, and our Hood Canal wrapping up the areas. Do we have a quick question?
Yeah, quick question for you. This is Nick. Did the area 10, 11 numbers, does that include the Muckleshoot, Elliott Bay terminal area?
Yes, thank you so much for that clarification. 1 second, I'm getting the call.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that does include catch in 10A. Now, when I removed 10A, it only dropped it by about 2,000. Yeah, I wanted to show the most representative catch for the effort that was out there, because I'm not too familiar with treaty fishing as far as how they fish the 10A line, if they kind of double dip.
And then do you have any numbers for the Squaxin fishery, the 13 extreme southern Puget Sound harvest?
I can drop those in the chat for our conversation purposes. I was just comparing areas that we as well fish with them.
Sure.
I do have that in a data set and that I can dump into the chat after the conversation.
And I do have the ISU share for the 46. This is the last available share update. For treaty, it was 93,726, and for state, it was 47,101.
Okay. Good, thank you, Mickey. All right, so yeah, we are on 12.
So Quasi, I don't know if you can see the hands, but there are a couple other hands up.
No, let's see, do I?
Mr. Kehoe and Mr. Moore both had their hands up.
Oh, I'm sorry, they're at the top of the participant list that I scrolled down on. Yeah, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm kind of following up on the Nick Jones's question. So the Area 10 catches, Area 10 and 11, except for the Elliott Bay, those are all kind of just marine area. They're not terminal area fisheries. Is that right?
Yes, I did not include any terminal area 10 fisheries. So no 10E, nothing in the Green River, just the big chunk of Area 10 and our Elliott Bay 10A fishery.
Okay. So, okay. All right. Thanks.
Shannon? Going once.
There, I unmuted myself. Yeah, thanks, Quasi. Kind of a spin-off from Bob's question. Well, first off, I'm looking at the 2023 catch Area 10/10A, and I'm seeing 172,000 fish. Is that correct?
17,200.
Well, that doesn't make any sense at all. I thought at the end of the season wrap up, the numbers were significantly higher. So, okay then, that's what they're reporting is 17,200 chum. That's what we're seeing here, right?
Yep, this was from a data poll, not 3 days old.
Yeah, okay. So, once again, I think Bob's question hits to the point that if we're trying to manage harvest for recovery of chum, we also need to be looking at some of these terminal areas such as Power Inlet. I think there was quite a fishery there. And, fish bound for the Duwamish in that system, and that's the Green River, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so at some point in time, those guys need to shake that loose so we can get a better idea of how our chum runs are doing. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Shannon. All right, I don't see any more raised hands, so should we skip up to where we were?
Oh, Quasi, it looks like Tony is physically raising his hand.
Okay.
Yeah, regarding Bellingham Bay, non-tribal coho catches, when is the non-tribal going to get a 50-50 split here in the Bay? And also, I think that the non-tribal need to share that quota of the 50% with the Rex. I think it's fair across the board that the tribes get their fair share of the Rex and the non-treaty. I mean, 39,000 coho went to the tribes last year in the Nooksack system, and that's unacceptable.
All right, well, thank you for the comment on that. Kyle, do you have any input?
I don't, Quasi. You touched on that fishery as you were going through the slides. It's very tough to get to a 50-50 sharing. If we really wanted to get to 50-50 sharing, we would have to get a bunch more commercial effort into Bellingham Bay and go catch those fish there. It's very hard to make the argument that we're not getting a fair shot at them when we have wide open sport fishery, when we're making hatchery escapements, when we have a pretty large by time of fishing, just not large by participation commercial fishing going in the bay. So as Mark mentioned in the main session, we'll be meeting with the terminal co-managers in the coming days to try to look at what management looks like for this year, and we will see where it goes.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. And I guess the one note I will say on our non-treaty 7BC, 2020 does represent the downshift during during chum management period to that single day or 2 days a week, and then single day for pursing. So 2019 represents our full non-modified schedule. So next slide. Don't worry, guys, we'll talk about schedule modifications right now. All right. So our 2021 preliminary expectations by area. This is quick. Obviously, later in the week, we will be meeting with co-managers to discuss where we stand as far as forecast and drafting proposed fisheries. But I wanted to give you guys an idea of where our team's heads are at, and just real quick run through the same areas we just talked about. So 6D, it looks like this week, we're starting in week 39. I have received no expected issues from co-managers. We will maintain the closure areas for Meadow Creek. Forgive me if I think it might be Meadowbrook Creek. You guys know what I'm talking about. And the Dungeness River there. Those seem to work pretty well. And Elwha and who's our other tribe there? They are happy with it, and we both are moving forward with 6D. 77A Pinks, our Fraser run, that's obviously to be determined. It's looking like the calendar breakdown for this year is a Sunday, October 10th, week 42 start for any chum fisheries that we have scheduled. So starting to take a dig into proposing our chum schedule. I need to sit down with Lummi and our northern counterparts to really get into the scheduling. Kyle, do you remember off the top of your head if we alternate first start on our 77A chum?
We were back when we first developed that sort of management plan for who would be open what days. I don't know if we've continued that in recent years.
Okay. Well, I know legally we can't get in there before that Sunday of week 42. So I'm going to be making the push for non-treaty first start. It's quote unquote first start, since there is gear time overlap for both treaty and non-treaty. Mickey, do you have any information concerning Fraser Pinks that would be prudent for today, outside of old forecast stuff that we've already presented?
Outside of forecast, I have no further updates.
Great, thank you.
We will be going through our share modeling in the current few months here coming up.
All right, thank you. 7B, 7C, the forecast this year should allow for the full schedule, so we'll hopefully not have to do the day restrictions during chum management. That was a little unheard of for last year. We have listened to the fishers up there, and will be proposing maintaining Chinook mesh size, a continuation of Chinook mesh size through week 37. It looks like the last year we stopped doing that was 2017. And so we have a history of doing it. I'll look up to see why we switched in 2017. But everyone on our side of things thinks that it shouldn't really be an issue to maintain a larger mesh size into those two overlapping weeks of coho. Heck, we used to call it like coho / Chinook management period for those weeks 36 and 37. I think I have some hands up. Let me scroll up to the top. Steve? Steve, do you have a question?
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
With regards to 77A,
Mhm.
and would like to know if the state is still planning to have a late September reef net coho quota fishery this year, this season, whether they're at least putting a placeholder in for that fishery.
Yes, that place has been held. Those fish are accounted for in coho tam and coho fram. So short answer, yes. We saw it worked quite well last year and don't have any reservations, especially towards Fraser or Thompson constraining coho stocks.
Thank you.
All right, Bob Keogh.
Yeah, thanks, Quasi. So on 7B, 7C, so it looks like we've got a good forecast, and kind of thinking back on the disproportionate catch, tribal versus non-tribal. I know we have, purse seiners, PSVOA has advocated for an extra purse seine day in 7B, and so because I think in the past we've been just limited to 1 day. So I would like to just kind of formally throw that out for the department's consideration. And I think that kind of gets to, I know Kyle was talking about coho, but more seine opportunity would likely help us achieve more of that 50-50 balance that we're looking for.
The coho one.
Can I ask for some clarification on that? Are you meaning during coho management or early on in late August where it's a Chinook management period?
Chinook management is what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So yeah, it's been traditionally been a Wednesday fishery.
Right.
All right. So I will note that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so area 8 and 8A, this is where it does look like there may potentially be pink opportunity. We are getting pinched in an odd spot this year, and that's our summer fall Chinook concerns for the Skagit, which generally is not something that we're worried about. So I've been working with Derek Dapp and Dan, our Chinook modelers, to try to craft a fishery that allows for some pink harvest in area 8. What we saw right off the bat was 8A is probably going to be a no-go due to Stillaguamish pink forecast actually being below forecast. So shifting the fleet, if you will, shifting them north up through Saratoga into kind of the Skagit Bay area to stay off of anything going up into Port Susan. Obviously, those fish come down through Deception Pass too and go into the Stilly. So this is going to be a fine tune where we have the room. We'll hopefully make that proposal. And of course, we're talking the 0.1% of impacts on the ER to Stillaguamish and especially for the Skagit. So the drafted pink proposal right now is weeks 34 through 36 on a 2-2-2 schedule, limited participation. And unfortunately, this is when our data falls short. Is, as you guys know, we have these agreed to mortality rates, but the studies that need to get out recovery box, yes, there have been studies in the 90s that kind of implemented them, mostly from Canada, and the studies that need to get out brailing to where to say like, okay, if we craft a fishery and then turn on brailing recovery box and short soak, what does that do to our Chinook mortality rate? Those aren't there. And since our mortality rate is agreed to, we can model our fishery at a kind of this higher mortality rate, but then us being fishermen and field biologists know that if we put all these other conservation measures in place, ultimately we're looking out for the Chinook we don't intend to catch. This is what we believe is the most beneficial thing to do. So that is why you'll see it's in the proposal that's in FRAM. It does, or excuse me, TAM does spell out coho, keeping coho retention, and then a short soak and recovery box for any proposed pink fishery in Area 8. I do not think we'll be successful in negotiating an Area 8A pink fishery. So Shannon Moore, you got a question?
Yeah, thanks. Gosh, I wanted to go back to 7B, 7C.
How about we run through the rest of the areas, and then we do have time at the end to kind of ping pong back to questions, because I have more information that's gonna lead to more questions.
All right.
Fred, I'll answer yours right now though.
Well, I'm about 7 and 7A with the chum fishery up there. Have you considered letting us keep our cohos with the abundance of them? And is that part of your plan? Or I brought that up last meeting. I was just wondering.
Mm-hmm. So that's something that I think we need to still look at, how big a bite of coho we actually take. I'm pretty sure it's quite minimal from the gillnet fleet specifically. But where it comes into question for me is how successful is that going to be in a year where we know that our co-managers, essentially feel very empowered to essentially dictate what the heck's going to happen. 7A has always been a little bit different because we roll out of that Fraser period where Canada's managing it for us, and then we kind of enter it on our own. We are fishing in common. We're fishing in common, gear type wise as well. And it seems like we have some stronger relations with that. So I think, yeah, Dave, do you have any further comment on that? I know you've been kind of playing around with some gillnet data.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of recent data to look at from our perspective what the impacts would be. I know last year, I think we quickly modeled it, and Derek noted that based on historic participation, that for a full season, they needed those release impacts over retention. But I think there might be a possibility. Mark had mentioned there's a few percent of Thompson impacts that could be available. So we'll look into that and get back to you for sure. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, I just appreciate you guys still, because it is something that it would be nice, and if keep your eye on that one and appreciate it. So thanks.
Hey, Quasi,
let me just jump in. I mean, certainly, if gillnets are allowed to retain coho, then I would certainly argue that the same should apply for pursaints.
Got that noted, Bob.
So Quasi, if I can jump in for a second, I assume that Bob was going to take offense to your claim that Canada manages the sockeye and pink fisheries for us. My recollection on that early chum fishery coho encounters thing, and I know it's been required release for a long time, was that most years they are pretty low rates of encounters for both years. It's those years where you get a surprise and there are a whole bunch of coho around and you land a whole bunch of coho really fast, that we have to be careful of. So we might have to, and I don't know that we've done a great job of, particularly for gillnets, monitoring what those first week or 10 days when coho release was required, how many encounters there were, but we might have to dig into some of the older data over a number of years just to get a feel for, okay, what's the risk? What happens if there are a bunch of coho around, and what would we do in season if we started seeing that?
Great, Kyle. Yeah, that's stuff I did not know. All right. Where did we leave off? 8A, 8D, 8D. So 8D closed as in similar years. At least that is our proposal that we're going to be going in with.
Next slide.
Next slide, yep. So 9A, we want to continue regional talks with Port Gamble Sklallam to, like I said, when we were looking at our 9A catch graph, to discuss removing the closure areas. The proposed fishery is a full schedule fishery. So 10 and 11 pinks. The schedule and effort are to be determined. We did input the impacts into FRAMTAM for a week 34 through 36 fishery on a 222 schedule for both gears. As you guys know, our area 10 pink fishery is limited entry. I was at a real quick glance, I was looking at the pink forecast back to the green. Let's see if I actually have that somewhere hidden in my screens. And there it is. So let's see. So the pink's bound for green, Puyallup and Nisqually. It looks like we're right around 940,000. And then comparing that to 2019, it is a bit more fish. So we are cautiously, I'm not even say cautiously optimistic, it's a cautiously moving forward with this proposal. That it is a limited entry fishery, knowing that we do have a 200 fish snook cap that kills the fishery if it were to take place. And so far, we haven't heard any direct objection to that pink fishery from our Central Sound counterparts. So moving forward in 10 and 11 with our chum fisheries, and we'll get into a little more detail on this. As it stands right now with the forecast, we don't have non-tree share available on the table to put a fishery forth on that first week of week 42. So we're in standby mode for relying on an ISU from the Apple Cove boat that would get us on the water if possible during week 43. So that truncates the season right there. And as this last sentence here, which we'll discuss in a couple slides, any proposed openings would be under a limited entry and tiered approach, which we'll learn about. This is generally because we do not see a successful argument during this low abundance time for chum with our co-managers that can make a push for full fleet. We are getting, as you guys saw from last year, we are getting strung out with this 10 and 11 area, and all the issues abound in it. So myself, Mickey, and Dave's approach was to, this is where that whole earlier bullet of think outside the box. What are some options that get fish out of the water and in nets for South Sound? You know, it may not look anything like it's looked like in previous years, but it's opportunity and it's harvest. So we'll talk about that in a in a second here. All right, so 12A, that's our coho fishery up there. No issues. We've had limited discussion with Skoke. We're proposing a full schedule. The forecast is about 7,000 fewer than 2020, which was at 39,000. So as of yet, we haven't been asked to pull back. Our effort up there is pretty minuscule anyways. 12B and C. It is a lower forecast this year. The non-treaty share as it stands on the preseason forecast is about 80,000 chum. Not to match South Sound, but again, the sentiment of the non-treaty fleet does too much. You know, we've heard this years and years and years now. You know, it's just too powerful, air quotes. That's not necessarily the sentiment that's driving our decision thinking. What we're looking at is worrisome data that says it's not that the fleet's too powerful. Maybe we're just in such a big downswing in chum that we have to be extra cautious on the conservation side. We could harvest to the point of damaging these runs on both sides, South Sound and Hood Canal. So again, we feel though that we can get away, hopefully, with a fishery that does start that week 42, but is under a tiered approach. All right, so the 12C beach seine fishery, we are shifting back to our Tuesday and Thursday schedule. As I ran through during a beach seine discussion a while back, this was I think DFW entered the conversation of these alternate dates, thinking that it was kind of a one-year deal. And I think there was tribes who thought, no, it applies to everything. So unfortunately, we're proceeding as with the it applies to everything method. So this year we switched to the Tuesday, Thursday with a preseason forecast of about 68,000 Chinook. We have proposed our previous 10,000 fish quota, though the agency is interested in having conversations about changing that quota to a harvest rate, which will allow for a slightly more flexible management moving in, not necessarily for 2021, but for 2022 and into the future, when we can say, okay, what's an appropriate harvest rate to put on 68,000 fish? Because I mean, right off the get, I mean, to me, just looking at it, saying that beach seines harvest 1/7 of our preseason forecast is yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, Steve, you got a question?
Yes, thank you. A couple of things about the 12C fishery.
Yeah.
One thing is that recent data has shown that when we move to the Tuesday, Thursday opening, our percentage of the harvest goes down.
Yes.
And that the tribes, even in previous years, when they fished on Tuesdays and Thursdays, still caught a substantially larger number than we did. So that if possible, that we could maintain our Monday, Wednesday opening would be my first point. My second point is that this year's a pink year, and that we would have a placeholder so that we could retain pinks during our fishery, and possibly also open 1 week earlier for the retention of pinks.
Okay.
So those are my points with 12C. Thank you very much.
Okay. On your second point of just a blanket pink retention, that's our game plan going forward.
Good.
Your third point of opening a week earlier will require some sit downs of Skoke. So thank you for bringing that up, though. All right, I think we're good for next slide, Mickey. All right, so season planning, and this gets back to that bullet point of a tier approach. So WDFW is proposing moving forward with a limited entry in both Hood Canal and South Sound. The potential commercial harvest on the low forecasted fall chum return requires adjusting preseason fisheries to accommodate different levels of effort with varying likelihoods. So one thing that we have learned with kind of exploring past harvest data is, what are the drivers that move the harvest adequately enough? And one of the largest drivers, as I'm sure you guys could guess, is effort. We've toyed around with, closing hours here. Probably the least significant is area closures, especially when we start doing these kind of smaller regional sub area, if you will, geographic closures. And so with knowing that effort is most likely our largest driver, let's start there and hopefully leave schedules as untouched as possible. So what we did is we created a modeling tool to analyze recent 3-year and recent 10-year harvest trends to design the stepped tiers that are based on ISUs. So we enter with a preseason like we do every year. We enter with our preseason forecast. But under a tiered approach, that forecast would dictate how many boats we put on the water. And that level of effort has been modeled to give us a ballpark of what our harvest is going to be. So these tiers represent a range. So it's going to be a window, just like, you know, the example here, 35,000 to 50,000, and they're based on share. That is not total run size. And as you guys know, our share developments differ on each side. So it does take into account that, you know, the South Sound share for non-treaty is built on double escapement and non-local retention. On Hood Canal, it doesn't incorporate that. So we're looking at the final, after all the calculations, non-treaty share, what is that window? And also what is proposed, because we know especially in earlier weeks, so 43 essentially, we know that the ISU has a likelihood, and Mickey can speak way better to this than I can, of, you know, over predicting or under predicting. We are buffering, and this is, you know, essentially to say, what are we going to do? Treat this year as the most extreme conservation measures for chum possible. We're going to buffer that lower end to say that our harvest is not going to exceed 90% of that lower share window, or the lower share of that window. So Mickey, you can go to next slide. All right, so here are the tiers as we've proposed them. And when I say propose, our co-managers have not yet been shown this tiered approach. We wanted to vet this with you guys first. We wanted to get comments and feedbacks before we sit down with them on Thursday. I do understand I mean, to put it bluntly, this sucks. You know, this is not an ideal situation to be planning fisheries, knowing that we potentially are trying to sell a limited participation, not only to you guys, but to craft something that we think is you know, palatable to our co-managers. Anywho, so breaking down the tiers, we start for South Sound at a tier 0. So this is any share that falls under 50,000. It does trigger a level of effort, but DFW does not feel comfortable in thinking that we get any form of agreement of getting boats on the water with a share that's under 50,000, because we saw that last year where we had non-treaty share with 0 opportunity and 0, I mean, the opposite of agreement. I mean, quite a good level of hostility coming at our proposal just to at least attempt a fishery. However, we did model it to show that with a very limited amount of effort, we could comfortably take, you know, up to 10% of that 50,000, which is right around 31,000. So as you can see, our effort models to give us that 10% conservation buffer due to recent ISU performance. Mickey, would you mind speaking to any of the ISU performance stuff, just for clarification?
Yeah, sure. I'll back you up there. So when the run sizes are so low, the predictability becomes, and uncertainty becomes much larger. And so what we found, just kind of going back through previous year ISU models and the return that has been reconstructed at the end of each year, we've noticed that there's some degree of error, especially when as are at the lows they've been in the past few years. Now, just getting back to what Quasi's saying about this, you know, this limited share at 50,000. So just to remind everyone, last year, at the end of the year in South Sound, we estimated a South Sound run size of 270,000, which resulted in a state share of 47,000. We did not fish that 47,000. We were closed at that point. But I just want to kind of focus in on the fact that under 300,000 of an estimate coming back to the South Sound is what we feel a low run size that is highly unpredictable when it comes to ISU evaluation. So that's something we're working on with our co-managers to improve in the coming months, improve the ISU model, get us closer to reality there. But it's going to be a challenge. And that's why Quasi has built in this conservation buffer for this recent year ISU performance.
Excellent. So as I did, yeah, can you go back to South Sound real quick? Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that we are with this tiered approach and with the low forecast, it does kind of force our hand into dropping week 42 until we receive an ISU. This model does work or does include effort for both gear types, both gillnet and Persane. Bob, quick question.
Maybe you're going to get to this, but so these different tiers, do they represent different levels of participation then? So in other words, if you're at tier 2, does that mean you could have more vessels participate than tier 1?
Yes. Yep. That's exactly what it means. For this presentation, I did not want to bug down the slides and honestly gum up the conversation with the nitty gritty and the weeds of each tier. We just wanted to present you guys with what we think is a good proposal to bring forth to co-managers at this point.
So can I just ask a follow-up, Quasi? So
of course.
So when you say you don't want to bog down in the nitty gritty, you didn't want to come up with or at least at this, make a presentation or say, okay, well, tier 1, we're talking 20 boats, tier 2, we're talking 40. You didn't really want to break it down yet on that?
So we can break it down. I mean, so essentially that has been done. That has been broken down to get a level of effort where we maintain our kind of past economic split of 74-26. And where I guess where we don't feel comfortable necessarily presenting that yet is
I mean, fair enough.
I want to get I want to get the bait and the hook down in the water, and I want the fish to bite it before I set the hook. So I want the tribes to say, all right, this is a tiered approach that we think will work with. Then I want to be able to say, okay, so here's what the tiers do represent. But yes, the short answer is for tier 1. Gosh, where is it? I have so many screens open on my computer. For these tiers, there is an associated level of effort. So what's up on the screen right now is South Sound. And this is when, yeah. So okay, so here's an example. So for tier 0, that's the where we just don't think we could convince co-managers to let us fish. That 30,009 represents an effort and 7 gill nets fishing a 1-1-1 schedule, weeks 43 through 45. So do this exercise when we say limited entry, it's our fleet does do a good job of catching fish. So to crank back does require pull-in boats, and it does require, as you saw, to get down to that level, the 10% below that 50,000, where we still think, gosh, if we're off and we do well, does it represent that the run's coming in? And if stronger, if so, fine, we're good. If it doesn't, then holy crap, we just smoked them. So getting down to that level, it does require removing a lot of fleet. So yes, those calculations have been constructed to get at these total estimated harvest values for each tier.
Okay, so just one last follow-up, and then So your strategy here then is, before you kind of make those numbers public for all three tiers, you just want to first broach this topic with the tribes and get their reaction.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And that's later this week.
Okay.
Which yeah. You're the hesitation in your voice is in my head. So, all right. Hood Canal, please. Next slide. All right. So a similar, identical tiers. It's a very similar model. We just know there are slight differences between Hood Canal and South Sound. Mickey and I are discussing what this tier 1 should represent. Do we be incredibly cautious and open that window up to any tier or any ISU that falls in between a 51,000 and 100,000 range, that we just say, look, we're not going to propose anything for over 45,000 catch. I want to emphasize with this management strategy, our goal, unfortunately, during this with these low abundances, our goal is not to harvest to the max of what we think we can do, even though it's, a share should have already had this baked in conservation, baked in escapement goals for all the tributaries of those regions. I just don't feel that that argument is something WDFW can make successfully to tribal co-managers, that let us just get at our share. And my main reason is we saw that argument happen. We saw that play out last year. We'd be barking up the same tree this year. I don't think there's been much co-manager sentiment that's changed in 9 months. So again, this is not ideal. This is not where we want to be. We don't, I don't want to be saying, okay, under tier 2, looks like, any ISU that falls in the range of 76 to 100,000. So let's say we get, a 90,000 ISU update. Let's craft a fishery that successfully gets us 90,000. Unfortunately, I just see no path forward to agreement with that stance, with where co-managers have been coming after our non-treaty commercial fleets. So a lot of that thinking went into preparing these tiers, is what not only is scientifically good to do, but what also is what's a successful strategy for getting harvest at some level on the water. So here's the tier breakouts. You can see once we kind of get into the larger shares, that we do differ in overall harvest that's just from past effort in the Hood Canal. So these schedules do reflect our week 42 through 46. I don't think we've had a week 46 fishery in 2 years. I think it's only 2 years. I thought we were in week 46 back in 2018. And that's where we do open up 12C. One thing why I am talking about Hood Canal, with any proposed Hood Canal fisheries, I did thumbs up Mark Botzell to attempt to negotiate the Hood Canal, or what do we call it, Hazel Point closure, away this year. We do have some pretty good observer data showing that, no gillnet, no treaty gillnet boat is out on the water during a per seine day where we're fishing on the borders of that janky Hood or Hazel Point area. So kind of the argument that our co-managers are bringing of keep a little chunk of water aside for treaty gillnet, it's not a thing. It's a non-argument. It's a negotiating tactic just to exclude our boats from a chunk of the Hood Canal. And it really doesn't make any sense. It just condenses everyone, puts everyone in lines. And I think hopefully, for us, that is, another kind of talking point on there is if we can come in with known conservation buffers, does that get us more real estate? Obviously, the bridge closure is dead on arrival for us since those guys fish directly north of the bridge. And I know that hasn't even been an issue in the last couple of years. So I kind of got myself sidetracked on that, the alternative to tier 1. So we do have, our tier 1 is 51 through 75. Mickey and I are still investigating if it makes more sense to have it a larger window that essentially incorporates tier 2. And so we had dropped down to a 3-tiered system. All right, Bob, another question?
No, it's just a residual.
Oh,
You
residual.
take my
Okay.
hand down.
Shannon, quick question.
Yeah, well, just to comment on the conservation zone there, that it's been a hot topic. I remember fishing there when it wasn't an issue. But now it's become an issue. What I will say is that the tribes that do fish in that conservation zone, we used to call it the Big Beef Conservation Zone, that the University of Washington had some kind of a study going on in there. But what goes on there is it's mainly the Skokomish guys up in there with sec nets on that shoreline, and we can't fish in that zone given the regulation, you know. So it's it doesn't make any sense to close that off if the tribes are concerned about that shoreline. We can't fish on that shoreline anymore anyway. So they do beat seine in there. They set net, and their fishery revolves around cohos mainly. Okay, so that's my comment.
All right, thank you, Shannon.
Bye now.
All right, you can go on the next slide.
Quasi, I just also want to talk about the ISU here really quickly.
Sure.
So yeah, again, the ISU in Hood Canal is CPUE based. So we're gonna have boats on the water to generate that number. But just as a reminder from last year, as this ISU approached 300,000, which would be one of our lowest run sizes in recent times, that low run size had a lot of uncertainty to it. And we still left share on the table. So you'd see that last remaining ISU resulting in a share of a little over 100,000. And at that point, we decided to shut down the season. So again, what Quasi is offering here in these lower tier options, this is to get at these available smaller shares where we didn't have a plan in previous years. So he's really thinking outside the box here to A, deal with uncertainty, B, the low, historically low run sizes, and C, just, ensure that we have some ability to access some of the available share at those low run sizes. So pass it back to Quasi.
Cool. All right, so all that information on the tiered approach still has work to be done. You know, as I mentioned, we have yet to propose it to tribal co-managers, but it also brings up two huge questions of, if we go limited entry, how the heck do we select the boats that are fishing? And this is where that earlier DFW commitment to open and thorough communication with you guys. So some options that are out there to us are a random lottery. Options that we've heard from some folks have been registration, where you kind of declare where you're going to fish. That would kind of be the registration by area. And I just put this bullet up here as the enforceability of any of the options, and that also ties into the legality of some of them. You know, we can't just do names out of a hat. This is going to have to be something to where we sit down and potentially involve the AG's office to make sure that any proposed selection of fisher is done randomly, is done appropriately, is done equitably for you guys, to allow all those who will pay they need to at least be selected. This is all in the works. This is something that, luckily we have until October to get it all hammered out, but I don't want to wait till October to figure it out. This is going to be a big summer, and north of Falcon process, because I can guarantee you if the tribes say, sure, we approve your tiers, they're going to want to know the inner workings of, well, how are you selecting certain boats? I myself am a fan of looking into registration. We've heard registration by area might make more sense, but then it comes into who's enforcing that. Are we putting extra duties onto our enforcement officers? That's not to say we're going to craft regulations with enforcement in mind, if that makes sense. We're going to craft the regulation with the fish and the fishery in mind. Enforcement can figure out how to enforce the rules. That's their job. But it's something that we're always cognitive of not making something this is just completely not able to be enforced. So that's where I kind of keep falling back into this. Well, if we just have, a registration that says, the week before, log on to this site or call this number, and it, the time for registering opens at midnight, and the first, however, 15 participants are the registered, that to me is fair. I can be convinced that it is also unfair because it does restrict, who has the best internet access or phone service or whatever. So these are the in the works things that are going to require more conversations and comments from you guys and us sitting down and looking through our CW and WAC to see where we can successfully go forward. The other thing in the works is this is kind of plan B if this tiered approach does not necessarily go forward. As I mentioned, removing effort is our largest driver of harvest, but we can also cap harvest if effort in shifting effort around isn't necessarily a possibility. And so that's where daily trip limits come into play. Fortunately, with our Hood Canal and South Sound fisheries, it's essentially one landing equates to 1 week of fishing for a per seine vessel. Where we would have to get funky is kind of our gill nets that can make multiple landings within a fishery. We do see sometimes 2 different tickets coming back that represent 1 night of fishing, if you will, or 1 day fishery, and that's the size of the vessel. That could be a limiting factor on that. We are still kind of tweaking and looking at what would represent trip limits. What's an equitable trip limit? It's pulling up a lot of your guys' past harvest data, looking at rates of fishing. Where this gets tricky is that, so let's say you put up, 400 fish limit for a night of area 10 gillnet, and you're out there, you do 3 total sets. Your first set's 20, your second set's 30, and then your next set is huge. Or does that mean the agency is going to be requiring the fisher to release all those fish? Those fish are not going to be released in good condition. So there is this, what happens if under this trip limit scheme, that we are still working on good answers to that. If the last set of the day bumps the fisher, and are they vulnerable to enforcement confiscating entire catch? Or if the tides just are not tides on that day that allow for a successful harvest of that total limit. Fisheries in other areas have struggled with daily trip limits as well. It's not as easy as just scaling up the rec side of things to say, here's your bag limit, go catch your 2 Chinook and 1 coho and call it good, or whatever the rec guys do. It is not at all that simple. Something that when I was first looking at this, I was like, whoa, so it's like IFQs. Not at all like IFQs. I kind of want to distance ourselves in this conversation as far away from that as possible. Just to give you some background on it, when ADF&G and NOAA, or NIMS, proposed IFQs for the sablefish halibut fishery up in Alaska, it was 14 years in development to get all those quotas and everything squared away. That just opens up a huge can of worms that honestly we don't have those tools in such a limited amount of time to pursue quotas per boat or quotas per license. Now in the future, who knows? Is that something that's a path that we could potentially look into, dedicate some staff time really digging into the equitability of IFQs for salmon. But as of right now, our plan A is to approach with a limited entry tiered option. Plan B is crafting trip limits that then allow us to get boats on the water for harvest, but under low abundance scenarios. And that's, I believe, the last slide of information. I think we are good to open this up for questions. And I guess I'll just ask kind of Dave and Mickey to unmute, and we can just take all the questions, or take the questions as a team. And yeah, we'll just use the raise hand. And also looks like the chat is also, I don't know if the chat's commercial only for those of you on the phone, but Mr. Kehoe, go ahead.
Yeah, so just, maybe this is a little bit picky, but I think what this, instead of limited entry, I think the more correct term would be limited participation, quasi, because these are limited entry permits, but what you're really trying to do is limit the participation in the fishery. So, and I think that's kind of what historically we've been using. And I don't want to get too bogged down in the terminology, but I do think it's, it's consistent with kind of what the department has called this before. So
okay, thank you for that. That is a great suggestion, especially if there's overlap with the term limited entry in WAC. That's where you want to. Yeah. So Bob, thank you very much for that. That is good.
Yeah, and then secondly, as far as you mentioned something about the ability to do limited participation in the form of a lottery. I mean, and I think Quasi, you were around maybe early in your career to see that actually take place, where everybody, on their license renewal form, there's a box to check. Would you be interested in something along the lines of being considered for a limited participation fishery? And the answer, people put yes or no. So I haven't seen the renewal form. I don't think that this is or I don't know. I don't recall seeing that. But in any event, so there is a history of doing this. So just so you know. And then lastly, kind of getting back to the pink fishery in Area 8A, or no, Area 8. 8A is closed. Would that be, and maybe you mentioned this, but I didn't catch it. Is that also a limited participation fishery as well?
I want to say I'll have to reach out to Derek, but I do think that's how it was framed in TAM-FRAM. And then that's where, I don't know, maybe I could throw it to Dave. Like I have not been here for a coho pink fishery in 8 or any of the 8s. So I was looking at past some of Kendall's old files. as far as that. And I do believe our last one was 2013 for pink targeted area 8's fishery. I think it was in the reg book as limited participation.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Kyle?
I was just going to add in response to not the specifics of the 8 or 8A fishery, but Bob's right. We have done limited participation in the past. And I believe we actually had not only a sort of questionnaire form that went out that not only asked, are you interested in limited participation, but it asked, in what areas are you interested? What fisheries are you interested? I think the point you were trying to make, Quasi, is if we go this direction with our chum fisheries, the limited participation's usually been on smaller fisheries. If we go this way on chum fisheries, that we'll be working to make sure we have a more rigorous documentable selection process than we might have done in the past for some of the small fisheries.
Yes.
Because obviously this is a bigger fishery than we have considered doing it for in the past.
Yes. Thank you, Kyle. Bob, is that residual?
Yeah, it's residual. Yep.
Scroll through. All right. Fred?
First off, appreciate all you guys are doing. I know it's a tough situation here. But I mean, this whole thing is we are kind of putting the cart before the horse before you go talk to the tribes, pretty much. So I'm kind of figuring everything is pretty wide open with this presentation that you're going to give to them, as far as they will have their say on how they would be good. So you were meeting with them on Thursday. So do we have an ad hoc or anything scheduled, or when will we be able to get their input on this stuff? Like, hopefully before next north of Falcon on the 26th, I believe, to see exactly where we're at with this, because it seems like there's an awful lot of moving parts.
Yes, there are. So we have tentatively the 25th, Thursday the 25th, scheduled for a commercial update meeting.
Will you be putting anything out, like, so is that you're meeting with them this Thursday? So pretty much you will go over this on the 25th then? Is that what you're
yeah,
looking at?
That's the game plan, is to relay to you guys, the outcome of NOF 1 WDFW and the tribes. So the outcome later in the week's stuff.
Okay, and as far as I mean, one thing that I hear about the registration on a limited participation deal, that that the first come first serve call in type things, it really a tough deal there. I don't like that at all. It's not. It puts somebody that's not so. It puts a technically challenged in the back seat there. So, and you never know where you're going to be on it. So, to stand by and wait for a KJR call-in type things, I don't really like that. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Noted. Greg?
Yeah, Quasi. There's not a lot about this proposal that I like, but if you enact it at all, I think like doing it below 50,000 and on. Anytime we've had over 50 or 60 of a share in the gill netters and seiners go, typically we don't go over that number, especially in 10 and 11. And I'm just kind of scared that if you come out of the gate proposing a limited participation to the tribes, they always grab on to that. I think they're going to latch on to this. This is great. This is a way to get more of us off the water. And I'm only in favor of using this if there's only small numbers to catch in 12 and 10 and 11, because up to 100,000, we very seldom go over unless it's a big run, and then we don't have that problem. So I'm against a lot of this.
Okay, well, I do appreciate the comment, and that's definitely food for thought. You know, it did cross my mind too, especially knowing our history of when we propose something, it's kind of taken as this is the stance that we're going to take for the, you know, continuing on and on and on, when oftentimes we mean it as, nope, this is what we want to do for this year. But I will note your comment, and so can I distill it back to you real quick just to make sure I got it right? Is, you know, general disapproval with all of it, but also once we enter kind of that higher share range, that you would not be pro limited participation, to reserve limited participation only for the very small share.
Yeah, I just think it's going to turn into, you know, when we like have 100,000 catch, and then you know, it's obvious the tribe don't like percenters, and they're going to say, hey, we only want 20 percenters out there. When we have a history of being able to go out there and stay with below our number, and everybody has a chance. So yeah, maybe if it was, you know, like there's been years where we had 40,000 on the table, and we don't go because you're scared we're going to go over our numbers, then this would be a good tool. But you know, here we are. There's maybe there's 4 or 5 permit holders on this call. So I mean, we have to involve all permit holders, I think, before you make decisions with gill netters and percenters, because this is a big proposal that really affects everybody. We got huge investments. Yep. And you're talking about giving us a lottery for, you know, 5 or 6 boats for, and you know, just permit renewals, getting crews, getting your gear ready and everything. It's a big investment. So I think it has to be thought out and really thrown at all the a good portion of permit holders, rather than making a decision going to North Falcon with something as big as this.
Understandably, yes, we've skimmed the surface of the economic impact. We are completely aware that. I don't want you to think we're proposing things without thinking of, you know, the finance of commercial fishing. So thank you for the comment, and I think we can definitely craft something to solicit more comments. As you do say, you know, yes, there are only a handful of permit holders on the call today, and we would like to hear from, you know, folks ranging from those that lease boats to those that are straight owners to crew share style. You know, we're not going to go into this blind without good conversations and good feedback from both fleets. So thank you for that, Greg.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you see my apprehension is coming out of the gate proposing this to the tribes, just like you said, because once they grab onto something, it's like, okay, this is it, set in stone. So that's a big fear of mine.
Gotcha.
Hey, Quasi, I do want to answer this another way. Again, sure. We are trying to access these lower shares, and like Greg mentioned, yeah, what happens after that threshold, you know, goes over that tier approach? Well, it does continue to scale up. You know, we start out with, you know, maybe 6 boats on the water, but it does scale up with every tier, and then to a certain point, there's obviously going to be an adjustment when the run size exceeds you know, this small conservation range. But you know, our goal really here is to not shut down everyone when we do have share on the table and the tribes are still fishing. And so in a sense, this was our you know, one of our strongest approaches to put boats on the water and think outside the box a little bit, which we haven't done in the past few years here. So so again, I just want to reinforce that the effort on the water does scale up as we move up the chain with ISU, and if the run comes back stronger than anticipated, there is mobility to upgrade the effort and the intensity of impact on the water for our side.
Hey, Quasi, Tom here.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate what Greg said, and Fred, I'm totally against this registration. Like, hurry, get on the call, and the first guy, first come, first serve. That's just ridiculous. And foremost, too, I'm against the lottery thing. Put my livelihood on chance of getting picked with this type of operation. And it just seems the sensible way to go is to mimic kind of what the Canadians done, where it's per fish, you get so many pieces and just divide it evenly. If we're under that threshold of 50,000, so many boats go fishing and catch it, and it's divided equally. I mean, that seems to me the only fair way to do this. And we've been in this business way too long just to put our name in a hat on chance. So like Greg said, if it's 100,000, chances are the whole fleet can go fishing with limited hours, perhaps, to stay under that number and monitor it closely. But on these low numbers, why can't it just be split up? Every permit that's renewed that intends to fish would get so many pieces that are on the table.
Okay.
Comment.
Yeah, Shannon.
Yeah, I don't know. My hand function working? I don't know what's going on here.
Your mouth is.
Okay.
That was a mean joke. Sorry.
Well, I don't know whether I got my hand up or my hand down with this.
You're good to go. Just
yeah. Okay. So listen. I see the Tom's point there. He mentioned that the Canadians do a similar program up there when they have low abundance. And what the Canadians do, what the seiners do up there is, if there isn't enough quota, they actually transfer their catch quota or their trip limit to the trawlers. The trawlers take it. There is a history there. But going back to what we need to do here, I think that the gill nets probably are the easiest group to manage for. We catch lower numbers, and especially during a year of low abundance, we're probably going to see lower harvest levels. So I'm thinking that for gill nets, I'm against this lottery thing. It puts a guy out of the picture on a chance. Not good. So I think trip limits is the best way to deal with the gill net fleet, specifically in Seattle. And you got the numbers there. Who fishes there. You just do an average over the last 5 years. You'll see. I don't think you got more than 30 boats there, maybe 25 that been fishing in Seattle. And so
yeah, effort's been pretty stable over the last 5 years. And you're right. It is a consolidated group of folks.
Yeah, they're easy to manage.
Well, I don't know about that statement, but
easier. Let's put it that way. So, and I don't know how you're going to work this with the seines. That's a tougher situation. And then what happens there? It's happened to me many times fishing in Seattle. We just strike out. There's no fish exchange of light. There's no fish through the middle of the night. So we pull a net in and we run like hell for Hood Canal. And that's how the gill nets play the game. They run hard. And so we want to be very cautious with how we manage this. We don't want it to backfire. And I don't know how you're going to discuss this with the tribes, but I'm sure they're going to have some input, and you could probably get back to us with what they're thinking.
Yep. Yeah, we will definitely relay what they're thinking.
And Nikki's right. These years of low abundance, we got to be very, very careful with how we harvest. And the only other thing I wanted to mention, when you guys are testing at Apple Cove Point, for crying out loud, would you pick the days where you got a full flood? That'll give you the fish come on the flood, okay? And testing through the ebb is not going to get you very good results. And the other thing that's happening that I heard about last year from the seiner that was testing at Apple Cove Point was that there were boats fishing in Area 9 on the line there in front of it, and that's got to skew your data something fierce. So the fish that encounter a gillnet, they do a lot of leading and they don't do a whole lot of catching, and that's why we harvest numbers at a lower rate. So anyway, okay, that's all I got to say about the scenario, how you're going to pick boats to fish, or whether it's going to be trip limit or registration. Okay, that's going to be a problem. Bye now.
All right, thank you for that. And so to briefly update on Apple Cove test fishing, we did kind of at the end of the year sit down with Bill Patton at Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission to kind of get at some of these issues that we saw from the test boat. We have not had an opportunity to sit down with him. Looking forward to 2021 fisheries. Last year there was kind of some wiggling around of different days. I think that's something that we'll try to put a stop to, is, select the days and stick to it. But that is a good comment about fishing on the appropriate tides for that specific location. And as far as getting at who can fish in front of us, whether it's the crabbers or gillnet fishing in front of the Apple Cove boat, we've brought it up multiple times during some technical conversations, and those never get relayed to the appropriate tribes as far as, is it appropriate to be fishing at the same time that the test boat is, and directly in front of them, or can we close that area to crab? That's a huge ask, while we have the seine boat doing a test fishery out there that benefits that tribe as well. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I understand it's challenging now that everybody's fishing it. Well, not everybody, but you got guys fishing in Area 9, but it's guys that are fishing right in front of the test boat. I think that's you guys could work with that. They could move up the line, but not directly in front of the seiner who's trying to get data that's not skewed. And so I guess that's about it. Thanks.
Greg, is yours residual from your last question, or is this a new question?
That's residual. I'll turn it on.
Fred, then?
I was kind of wondering if you could explain a little bit about how your meeting on Thursday works with the tribes, and if you do have a back and forth, and if it's do you talk to them, and is there a back and forth there? Do you meet with them, a days after to try to figure things out, or do they come up with an idea, and then when your next meeting is with them? And what I guess what would be concerned about is, as Greg said, there's only a few permit holders on this call, and it would be really nice if I could get some information to bring back to my board on how things are going with them, to try to, and even to help you guys out, and so we could come up with, some type of plan here, because if we have an ad hoc meeting on the 25th of March, and then our North of Falcons on the 26th, it just doesn't there's not really a lot of time a lot of this stuff takes a while to absorb and try to figure things out. So I guess what I am wondering, how does it work with the tribes? Do you have like one meeting with them on Thursday, and then when would your other meeting with them be?
Kyle, you want to take a stab at that?
In our big table meeting on Thursday, I'm sure we will, particularly the South Sound tribes have been meeting and talking about some of this stuff, and we don't know what they're going to come back with. At the big table meeting, I'm sure there'll be some, probably not into any level of specifics, but a little bit of back and forth, and that we will then schedule additional meetings to talk about chum, but I don't know what the timing of those will be at this point.
Will they have suggestions for what? I mean, I'm pretty sure I got a pretty decent idea what their suggestions are going to be, but I mean, are they that difficult to work with, or?
I think part of the issue is the tribes have been talking amongst themselves and haven't all gotten on the same page, so they really haven't brought us much. I mean, there's this general agreement that no one is going to fish areas 10 and 11 based on the preseason forecast, that it would take an ISU before the state or Tulalip or Suquamish went fishing in the marine area, the main marine area of Area 10. But until we start hearing some results of what their internal intertribal talks have been, it's hard for me to say where we're going to be. And Quasi's had his head way deeper in this stuff than I have recently. He might have a different take on where the tribes are, but that's my impression.
No, I do not. It's something that Mickey, Dave, and I are actually hoping to have a huddle up of, getting some regional discussions started. It's been tougher than usual this year.
So this is Bob. My hand isn't up, but can I just kind of weigh in?
Yep.
Yeah. So, kind of hearing some of the other comments, I do think, and well, let me back up and first say that Quasi and Dave and Mickey, I think you guys is, your heart is in the right place in trying to craft some sort of fishery in a challenging year. But, I think Mickey, his presentation on the forecast, I think at least gave me some comfort that, hey, we're in a low stretch here, but, that history says that we're likely to rebound and see more kind of abundant runs. I just don't, I think, by going with this tiered approach, you in a very, very poor year, right? You might end up, and as Greg, I think, alluded to, is, you might present something or go forward with something in a really bad year that the tribes will insist upon when things come back. And so I think from a policy perspective, you need to be a little bit careful about that. It's like, how far do you go down the road to preserve just a small amount of fish that really isn't, kind of economically worthwhile, and then kind of jeopardize kind of in the future your management approach with the tribe. So I think, and again, I'm not overly critical. I think we need to be careful, and hearing some of the comments, I think, makes me even feel that stronger. So I know, Kyle, what do you think about that?
It's a balance, Bob, between not wanting to go into the season with no plan if we do get surprised by Apple Cove Point, and that we have some harvestable, and not being ready to do something. So, I mean, it kind of cuts both ways. Do we want to be in a situation where we're just saying, okay, if this is the preseason forecast, we're not fishing this year? But yeah, we're always worried about what precedent anything we do might set for the future for sure.
Greg?
Yeah, just to change it up here a little bit, we, going in after the end of last season, and there was that language that the tribes hung their hat on, in concurrence with, and then the Area 9 fishery. Those are two big issues that we've been fighting on. How are you going to go into this north of Falcon and that language? Have you proposed any of that yet, or is that coming up?
Kyle can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that in concurrence with language has been stricken from this year's loaf. I believe there was a small group meeting between director and chairwoman Lorraine Lomas that got to that topic for South Sound, for the language that was in the loaf for last year, and discussed the miscommunication and what ultimately led to no fishing. And as far as Area 9 goes, that's still a huge sticking point for us as well. I mean, as we saw, they're fishing on a bad year, was it 14 something thousand north of the bridge. That's obviously an issue for anyone, tribal or non-tribal, fishing in Area 12. We are ready to propose our test fishery again for Area 9, to essentially say if there's harvest up there, this needs to be collected. Data on it needs to be collected. The co-managers have been very reluctant in sharing any information about their Area 9 test fishery. A lot of that's due to the internal infighting about Area 9. There's tribes that do not want other tribes in Area 9, namely, the Hood Canal tribes don't want Suquamish up there. So as far as any policy directive on attacking Area 9, I'll turn that over to Kyle.
So on the first point, Quasi, I wouldn't say that language has been stricken from the loaf for this year. We haven't developed the agreement and the language for the loaf this year, but we made it clear that language was not acceptable and will not be in the loaf this year once we get to developing sort of the management plan and language for South Sound. And yeah, the Area 9 thing, I mean, my focus is these are real impacts that need to be accounted for. I don't think we will have any success in trying to push the tribes out of fishing in that portion of their UNA, but we can push to make sure that the impacts are being accounted for appropriately. They're not just free fish off the top of either share.
Okay, and Kyle, I mean, I really don't believe their numbers. Is there a better way we can account for what they're catching? Because I mean, just if you look at Area 10 and they're telling you, and then you put it up on the screen earlier, that they caught 17,000. And we were told by Mark, and actually I videotaped it. It's on my phone. And it was 60,000 that was caught in Area 10 between the Muckleshoots and the other side. And 40 of it was on the other side, and he said 20 of it was from Muckleshoots out in the open area. So I mean, that's a huge difference. So you showed us 17 today, and you told us 60 a few months ago. So
Greg, I'm going to interrupt real quick. Mickey did side message me that he believes that Muckleshoot was not included in the total I presented today. So that must have been my error in pulling that data. But it does show. Okay, he just sent me some. So where Muckleshoots catch and what makes up that 60 is in river 80B. So that's Duwamish catch as well. Where we get some of the other numbers is looking more in the marine area. So Muckleshoot was heavily on the 80B side of things.
Yeah, and yeah, we were told that, but going by that fishery and watching them pick fish as we're running towards the canal because 10 was closed. They had some really good days. And, we, as the season went, we were told it was close to 40 in Area 10, not including the Muckleshoots. And then the area 9 fishery is way underreported too. I mean, some of that is quick reported, I think, that you see, but we're dependent on their numbers. So, I mean, I know you have a tough time going in negotiating and trying to make them more accountable to what they catch. But I mean, that's a huge issue if we're going to count fish and they underreport. It's and they're taking more of their share, and then there goes our escapement. So, I mean, that's an issue that going forward, we should keep pushing on them and trying to address.
And particularly for the chum fisheries, a lot of those fish go through non-treaty buyers and we get reports on them. It's not that we're completely relying on the tribes to report their own catch. And yes, if we see areas that look like problems and we have good reason to think things aren't being reported, then we look into them and try to address them. But we're not flying completely blind because of the number of chum that are going through non-treaty buyers and getting reported on, often on quick reporting and on fish tickets directly to us with our copy of the fish ticket.
Okay, thanks.
Shannon? And then I don't remember off the top of my head what we scheduled this entire meeting for, but we are at 11:55, approaching the lunch hour.
Okay, one comment on accountability. The treaty buyers have to pay state tax, so I'm sure that poundage goes into the department. So, you know, those numbers can be accounted for. But what I wanted to talk about, back to Area 7B, during our coho fishery up here, we'd like to see you open that season for cohos in Bellingham Bay. And I'm not saying Samish, I'm saying Bellingham Bay, the last week of August. So we can better access those fish before they hit the reservation shoreline. Once they're on the reservation shoreline, we're done. So, and then talking about the Chinook management plan, if you could go back to 2015, look at the 2015 plan. Let's stick with a similar Chinook management plan as 2015. We don't want to give up any time anymore because it's fruitless. We're not getting any production. So yeah, so the Chinook, Bing, Samish, and then 5-inch minimum the last week of August, which will allow the coho fishermen to catch cohos, and it still keeps the Chinook fishermen in the game with their 7-inch. So, you know, what I'm saying is fisherman's choice for gear the last week of August in Bellingham Bay would suit us well. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Shannon. Got that all jotted down. I think, you know, great conversation. I really do appreciate you guys taking your time out of the day and voicing your opinions, concerns, and comments. You know, this is all information that makes myself, Mickey, Kyle, and Dave's lives a whole lot easier when we can go into things with information that provided by you guys. As I said earlier, it looks like we have a placeholder for 2 p.m. commercial update on the 25th. We'll be sending out the Zoom invite for that, most likely at the end of this week, just so you guys can all get that on your calendars. And, you know, as always, feel free to drop us a call or send us an email with any further comments or concerns. But we look forward to touching base with you guys after our NOF1 with the tribes later in the week. We'll be sure to get all the good information out your way. Any final comments or questions before we pause to take a lunch period? Greg?
Yeah, just one. Maybe when you send an email out, just to maybe to increase participation, if there's a few key areas, topics that might include some permit holders, they might pay more attention to it, because it'd be nice if we had more people on this call, especially if you're talking about doing limited participation fisheries and so forth. It might make guys make notice a little bit more.
Gotcha. Good point. All right. Well, thank you guys again. Hope this information was well presented, and look forward to talking to you guys in the next week.
Thanks, Quasi.
Thanks, Quasi.
Thank you, Quasi, Kyle,
Thank
Mickey,
you, guys.
Dave. Yeah.
No problem.